First of all, hi everyone. Welcome to Smart Water Wednesdays. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Ben Coffey, and I have with me my friend from the desert, Chad Mosier of Ewing Irrigation fame. Chad, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
It is certainly a pleasure. You are my first Ewing guest, so I am so excited to have you on today. And today we will be discussing programming your WeatherTRAK for local water restrictions. As we approach the heat of summer, we see across the country water restrictions becoming the rule rather than the exception. And so it's nice to know that in pursuit of good smart water management, your WeatherTRAK will obey any water restrictions that we've seen anywhere in the country. And we're going to talk today about how to dial that in and what you can expect from your controller when you do. So I started off by pulling up, this was going to be my punchline and I already gave it away. I just couldn't wait to talk about the Avs with you, Chad Mosier. But we were going to start by talking about the water restrictions that Chad and I see in our backyard. And these are great examples, right? Here is the Terminator from the ice, the Golden Knights kind of threatening you to don't water it on Sunday, right? And telling you specific days and times that you are allowed to irrigate. Chad, is this the first year that this restriction has been in place? And what kind of restrictions have you seen in the past?
Actually, no, these restrictions have been in place for longer than I've been in town. I've been in town for 7 years, and I've known that these restrictions have been in place for quite a while. And what's interesting is they do break it up into separate categories across the valley. So you're either in group A, B, C, D, or whatever. They break it up by town. So you got Las Vegas, you got East Vegas, you got Summerlin, you've got Henderson, you've got City of North Las Vegas, and including Boulder City. And it's easier to manage that as far as the water that goes through the system throughout the valley, I guess is the best way to put it. So you don't have everybody in the valley watering on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. So Group A is going to water 3 days a week, and you've got Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then you've got Group B, and they just break it up really well doing that. Time frame, especially right now, is they don't necessarily want you to water throughout the day, especially during the heat of the day. Obviously, the water is going to evaporate a little quicker, so they expect you not to water between 11 a.m. and 7 p.m. So that way you've got that watering beforehand, and you can actually get that water to percolate into the soil and be available to the plant without evaporating faster than it can get there.
And then what do your water districts do to put teeth in your water restrictions? In some places they have what my water managers lovingly call the water police that go around and ensure that this is happening. Is there anything like that in place?
I have experienced a couple of individuals or HOAs or properties, whatever you want to call it, get fined significantly. They've been noticed that, hey, if this problem persists, this is what's going on. This is the added fees, I guess, for watering more than what you should or watering outside of this threshold, but also, as we'll, I'm sure, talk about a little bit later, watering on days you're not supposed to.
Yeah.
And yes, I have seen, some pretty significant fines, which obviously proposed my conversation about having something like WeatherTRAK to be able to manage that a little bit more closely.
Yeah, we definitely see water restrictions and water laws kind of driving the conversation towards smart water management. The visibility and ability to react that comes with our type of technology really does save a ton of gallons just by watching the water more closely.
Sure.
So let me go back to here. As another example, we'll talk about Denver Water. This is in my very own backyard, but they too have very similar rules and restrictions, days and times that we can allow for irrigation. And one thing that drives this is this big, ugly map right here that we are both part of, right?
Mm-hmm.
The drought in the West is making headlines for sure, and is something that we want to continue to pay attention to. Water scarcity is driving the price of water up, making smart water management a necessity, really. And not only that, but making it something that is economically feasible. The choice to waste water is one that is going to cost you on your water bill, and to invest in technology like the one that I represent, the ones that we represent, can really help manage this in times of drought and water scarcity. And that's really kind of the point, is not only, to your earlier point, managing the supply and making sure that your water treatment plants can provide all the water to all of the necessary people, but eliminate the water waste and make sure that that water is there when we need it.
Exactly.
And so with that, let us jump right in. So what we saw in both Vegas and Denver and across the country is water restrictions that look like restrictions on times that you're allowed to irrigate. And so we are gonna go into the WeatherTRAK features that allow us to manage that. WeatherTRAK will only operate when we tell it that it's okay to operate, when we allow it to run the irrigation schedules. And so the biggest banner on that hockey poster was about water days. Don't water on Sunday. And Colorado is, or Denver water is 3 days a week. So we manage a different way a little bit. So when you are looking at programming your WeatherTRAK, the first thing we want to talk about is called water day mode. And the water day mode defines which days we can allow irrigation. And we've got 5 different options that we can allow for. The first one is what I think that Vegas is selling, is called Optimized by WeatherTRAK. And that's the one that if I had no water restrictions, this is where I would leave it. Optimized by WeatherTRAK allows your smart schedules to decide which day they're going to irrigate. And by rule, we have one non-water day available, which would make it perfect for don't water on Sunday, but by design is for maintenance days, the routine mow crew days. We want things to be dry for the mow crew. Other things that we see, other restrictions that we've seen across the country, odd or even. This sign right here says that if your house has an odd or even number, it corresponds to the odd or even date on the calendar. The 1st, the 3rd, the 5th go to the odd addresses, and we have a water day mode that makes that easy. And then water day interval, I could not for the life of me find an example of, but back in the day in Denver, we had a restriction that you were assigned either a square, a circle, or a triangle, and there was a calendar that had, this is when square days water, this is when circle days water. And so you were on a once every 3 day watering routine or a 3 day watering interval. So WeatherTRAK has that. You can separate that out as much as every 31st day, once a month. And then the most common thing that we see is days of the week. We see it in Beverly Hills. We see it in Denver. Chad says in the off season, this is what you guys have, right?
Correct.
When it's not 105 and you can afford to take more than 1 day off a week. But with WeatherTRAK, you go in and program in the water days, defining which days you can allow irrigation. And then we also have a cool thing called days of the week by month. So here in Colorado, we have this City of Westminster property where April through October, they allow 5 days a week to irrigate, but November through March, it's only 3 days a week. And with WeatherTRAK, if you program that in as days of the week by month, you can let the controller do that for you and you never have to touch it. So it's a very great way of saving time. And then one thing you have to be aware of when you're doing this is the crossover of midnight. Some water restrictions are very, very strict on that midnight cutoff. If they say you're allowed to only water on Wednesday, they mean from midnight on Wednesday to midnight to 24-hour period, midnight to midnight, right? And so WeatherTRAK doesn't automatically do that. That's something that you as a manager have to be aware of. So that has come back to bite some of my users. Make sure that you understand that any start time will allow all of the irrigation for that start time, even if it crosses midnight. So we want to not disobey any sort of regulations, and that midnight to midnight crossover is one that sticks. So I want to show that. We'll go here. Oh, still on the drought monitor. All right. So for that, we go into our program page on weathertrak.net. The easiest place to see is here on the program page. We'll go into days and times, and this is my own house. So it's an LC controller that gives us 2 different programs, and each program has its own water day mode. If you have selected optimized by WeatherTRAK, your option is an exclusion day or a non-water day, water any day except Sunday, right? Or you can come in and say odds or evens, days of, or water day intervals, sorry, I skipped that one. Every 3rd day is what we gave the example of, but this is great. You can do every other day, easy peasy. And then this is what I do most of the time. Days of the week. Go in here and say I'm only allowed to water on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And this is going to only allow the irrigation that starts on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And we'll get to start times and water windows next. Chad, talk to me about your battles with water days. What do you know? What do you see from your guys about obeying water day law? Is that something they struggle with, or something that's easy for them?
No, it is a huge struggle. So those larger properties that have, say, multiple different controllers out there, and they're all standalone, and you've got to irrigate all of the streetscapes or parks within this community. It just doesn't. It's not able to manage it to where they're able to stack and optimize what they're able to water to keep that water window down. Right. So I can't water valves, 1, 5, and 12 because the pipe will actually have enough water in there to manage that. So they have to go 1, 2, 3 down the line. And with that, like you had just mentioned, it's not going to shut off at any specific time until everything is watered. So when you have to water, like you were talking about, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, say Monday, you have 18 valves, valve 15 cuts off at, say, midnight. Well, guess what? It's going to continue going 16, 17, 18 into the water window that you're not allowed to water in. And guess what? Now you're qualified for fines and harassment.
Exactly right. All right. So one thing I did want to highlight is if we are managing those water days, WeatherTRAK has an alert that you might see. If I restrict the days that I'm allowed to irrigate, if your controller is running the automated by WeatherTRAK program or that ET-based schedule, then you might see what we call a water day alert. This is only for controllers that have stations in auto mode. And if the controller decides that that ET-based irrigation schedule wants more days than your water restrictions have allowed, then you're going to get a water day alert. Basically, a water day alert is saying, hey, I want 5 days to irrigate to keep up with the ET, and you've only allowed me 3 days to irrigate. This is not a critical alert because this is something that if you only have 3 days by your local restrictions, it doesn't matter what the ET or the science wants. We always want to obey those water restrictions because there's fines and penalties and public humiliation for those who break those rules, right? So WeatherTRAK will always abide by those rules. And if we aren't able to irrigate, it will just continue to accumulate depletion. And when it is allowed to irrigate, it will do its best to catch up. So on to the next subject, right? We define the water days, or the days we're allowed to irrigate. And this is where it gets a little more tricky. The start times and water windows, right? This is defining when in the day irrigation is allowed. And you said no irrigation between, what was it, 7 and 11 or 11 and 7?
11 a.m. to 7 p.m.
Yeah, right through the heat of the day. They don't want you throwing as much water into the air as you're throwing into the ground. So they tell you not to water through the heat of the day. And that's the way that we manage that with WeatherTRAK, is defining the start time and water window. Start time is the time your program absolutely will start. And the water window is the time that we can allow that irrigation to happen out on site. So if, for example, I had a big property and I couldn't irrigate between the hours of 11 and 7, I would have a 7 p.m. start time and a, what is that? Let's say 5 plus 11, 16-hour water window, right? Saying it's the 16 hours following my start time are allowed for irrigation. But if it gets to 11 a.m. the next morning, irrigation absolutely has to stop. It cannot run. And so again, if we can get through all of the irrigation, WeatherTRAK will do that. If it can't get through all of that irrigation, you'll get what we call a water window alert saying, hey, you restricted the amount of time I have to irrigate, and I wanted more than that, right? I wanted 17 hours of irrigation, and you only allowed me 16. Mm-hmm. And so if that is the case, if you're getting a water window alert, know that, first of all, WeatherTRAK will do its best to lay down all of the irrigation that it can, right? It will abide by the programming, but it will do its best to water as much during that time as it can. Included in that is any station that needs irrigation will get at least some irrigation. We're going to turn down all stations incrementally to make sure that each station gets some, right? We're not just going to leave your last few stations high and dry. We're going to make sure that everything gets water. And then if your stations are on automated by WeatherTRAK, again, we will track how thirsty each station is and carry that depletion over to the next day. Now, this is where the fun starts, Chad. This is where we get into the conversation that you wanted to have about this, and that is the tricky ways that we can find more time in the night for irrigation. So tell me your story about this. Tell me what brought this about.
Well, like I had mentioned a little earlier, I'm working on one specific project, and out there it's a master community, and they have multiple different controllers, and they are continuously being fined currently because they are not able to stack or overlap or basically utilize as much water as they can to water as much as they can, and therefore they're getting fined for watering outside of their water windows. It gets to be very, very tricky to manage, let's just say 30 standalone controllers. And let's just assume you got 1, even 5 guys. I mean, that's a lot to manage when you're going 1, 2, 3, 4 throughout the valve, throughout all the valves. So the best way to do that is have one central control that is able to optimize your flow based off of your backflow sizing, how many backflows, what controllers and what valves are associated with those backflows, you know, what you're actually watering as far as plant material, what your soil content is going to look like, so that way you know how quickly the water is going to percolate into the soil, so that way you know how to manage your time. So it's very, very important to be able to stack and utilize as much water possible, so that way you can water and keep that water window short.
That's exactly it. And so in this discussion, we want to explore ways that you can find more time, right, to get the irrigation done that you need to get done. And we have two separate strategies we want to talk about today, right? The first is for a standard WeatherTRAK, either the Pro 3 or the LC controllers. And like you saw before, my LC, my little 18 station guy, has 2 programs. The Pro 3 that we're looking at here has 8 programs. And it's important to understand that WeatherTRAK has the capacity to run as many as all of these programs at the same time, in an attempt to find those extra minutes, to find more time, right? And this focuses on this feature called stack or overlap. If you notice right here, the WeatherTRAK comes default in what we call stack mode. And if you're in stack, then all of your programs will have the same start time and water window. You can differentiate water day mode by program still, but they're all going to run inside the same time every day. And they're only going to run one station at a time, right? We assume that in stack mode, you only have the hydraulic capacity to run one station at a time. And so that's the way it comes in its default out of the box mode. If I come here to setup and change that from stack to overlap, you notice that when I make that change, then all of those programs now open up, right? And they have the ability to have their own start time and their own water window. So if you are managing, say, a high school, for example, and you want to manage your football fields, have your football fields water at a different time than your baseball fields, this is how you do that. But in unlocking the overlap, you also unlock the ability to run these programs at the same time. If these programs share time in the water window, WeatherTRAK will try and push those 2 programs or those 3 programs or all 8 of those programs at the same time. And this is hugely valuable. This is where we can absolutely save time by running multiple stations, by running multiple programs to kind of get all of the irrigation that we need in a day. Chad, is this, do you have experience doing this with your guys?
I have had experience with more guys that know how to do it already, and now I'm in the process of kind of educating individuals that this exists and what is needed in order to use this kind of technology, right? And that's currently where I'm at a lot of the time.
So what I see is the big obstacle here is if we're trying to find time in this way, that sometimes guys get overexcited and they split it up too much and they push their hydraulics over the edge, right? They start running 8 programs at the same time and overtax the system by just trying to run more irrigation than their main line is capable of handling. So one of the tips and tricks that I recommend, if you are doing this and you don't have a flow sensor and you don't have flow visibility makes this a lot easier. But if you don't have a flow sensor, what I do is have the guys go through and label each station small, medium, and large, right? You have all of your small stations, your drips, have your mediums as your sprays and your large rotor heads, all separated out by program, and then turn on the largest drip, the largest spray, and the largest rotor, the largest small, medium, and large at the same time, and make sure your system has enough capacity to keep up, right? If it's not affecting your pressure and your distribution uniformity running the three largest, then you can run any one of those at the same time. You can mix and match in between the smalls, mediums, and larges with impunity, right? Without affecting how that system is delivering. So, and by doing that, you're running 3 stations at once and saving just a ton of time.
Sure.
And then we get to the fun stuff. This is where Chad wanted me to go. Had to stop by the everyday users first, but the best solution that I know of for battling water windows is the Optiflow solution. And with Optiflow, we have the ability to go in here, and I bet that these Red Rock HOAs are on a rain pause. We've got, I hate to rub it in, Chad, but we've had nothing but rain here.
We got 1/100th of an inch, and everybody got excited saying, oh yeah, it's been a little over a year and we got some rain.
All right, so I'm gonna lean on one of my previous guests, because all of my Colorado demo controllers have rain pause on them, and my friends from Cowboys Stadium said that I could use this at any time. So in a pinch, we're going to talk about Optiflow. And with Optiflow, what we have is the ability to let all of our controllers work together, and we can program in a design capacity. Oh, and they're in shutdown too. Struggling. Oh no, we're fine. So what Optiflow does is we go in and program into the system how much water we can push through the main line, and Optiflow will hand select which stations it can run together to keep you running at capacity, right? So in this case, we set up a system that has a 600 gallon per minute capacity, and it's got, I believe, 8 controllers that are pulling its water from this big looped main line. And so Optiflow goes through, it knows how many gallons per minute the main line can supply. It knows how many gallons per minute each station uses, and it will develop an irrigation program that does exactly what Chad wants it to. It understands where your system limits are, and you can go through and push just as much irrigation through that system as your design will allow. We give you the mathematically shortest runtime by keeping your system running as close to its capacity for as long as it can to get all of the irrigation you have to do on a large or complex site into a very manageable watering time. So that is how Optiflow works. If you are battling water windows, I promise this Optiflow is a great solution. It can run as many as, again, 8 stations per controller on the Optiflow network, meaning if I'm right, and this is 8 controllers, Optiflow could run as many as 64 stations at a time on this loop to keep that system running at that 600 gallon per minute capacity. So in my eyes, this is the bee's knees when it comes to managing those restricted water windows. Chad, what's your experience with Optiflow?
Very little at this, as far as personal experience, outside of knowing that it exists and seeing a huge opportunity is in this particular market for that system.
I'm sorry, I got distracted. I was reading a question from Paul. Paul writes in, if the water window stops at valve 5, for example, can we have it start at valve 5 next time? And the answer to that is no. The WeatherTRAK creates its own schedule at every start time. And so again, we're not gonna leave you high and dry on that station forward, right? It is going to make sure that all of those stations get some water, but it will recalculate and recalibrate at the next start time to jump back in and build that schedule to get as much irrigation as it can. There's no way of controlling where it stops or starts inside that irrigation window? Great question, Paul. All right, Chad, we are running thin on time here, man.
Ready?
What? Yeah, I know, it goes fast.
It's getting going, man.
So I wondered, do you have any final thoughts on water restrictions before I put you to the standard special guest question?
So final thoughts is definitely know your market and know that there are individuals out there to help. So definitely asking, identifying the resources available, and don't be afraid. No question is a stupid question. We're all here to help. We're all in the same industry to ultimately save water and allow everybody to have, the landscape that's available in those markets, and to keep them healthy and thriving, but ultimately protecting our water resource. So.
And if they are in the Vegas market and they want to contact the man, the myth, the legend, Chad Mosier, how can they get a hold of you?
I've got my either through email is probably the best one. I do get about 75 phone calls a day, and occasionally I miss one or two. But either text message or email is probably the best way.
Sounds great. And it was a great lead in. You didn't even know I was going there, but I always plug the support. We didn't get to optional second start time today. We'll cover that on a different day. WeatherTRAK training resources and support resources aplenty. Please, if you have questions about how to manage your WeatherTRAK, you can always call me. You can always call customer support at the 800 number, or email them at support@hydropoint.com. So that is a whole host of resources. If you have questions, both the Ewing support team and the HydroPoint support team are here to help. All right, Chad, I forgot to warn you about this. So this is coming right off the cuff. Okay. But for every first-time guest, I ask them the same question. What does WeatherTRAK save you?
Right now, not a lot. and I say that because I am I know I've got a long battle ahead of me in educating and getting the WeatherTRAK system into as many hands as wisely as I can, so that way they understand the programs, they understand the process, they understand the information that's going to be coming to them. But ultimately, if I were to have, instead of one Tom Radin in town, say I've got 75, and that would save not only me time and information, but ultimately we're talking about significant water savings. We're talking about significant happy customers, less fines, and ultimately getting that mission, that I guess that mission of saving water and protecting this valley and our resources significantly. And so in the long term, WeatherTRAK has a potential to save me, and not only me, but everybody in this in the world, I guess, because we're all protecting the same resource. So it's very important. So longevity wise, it'll save quite a bit.
Absolutely. Great perspective. And honestly, that is something that we have taken on this show. That role of water manager that Tom plays for Par 3 is something that we see in the most progressive landscape companies, in the places where water is a hot button topic, inside organizations at all levels. So it is something that we are seeing develop, and hopefully continue to see progress in. So great answer. Thank you, Chad. And then one last thing. Next week, we will have another summertime topic. Another Chad. My friend Chad Sutton will be on to come and talk about, Chad is a water manager for Gachina, and he is great at managing to a water budget, knowing how many gallons he has to use and managing his irrigation systems to match that allocation exactly. And so we're going to talk to him about his process and the WeatherTRAK tools that he uses to get there. So looking forward to that. In the meantime, Chad Mosier, thank you so much for making time for us this morning. I certainly appreciate you joining me.
You're very welcome, and thank you for having me on.
It's always a pleasure. We'll talk soon.
Sounds
Thanks,
good.
everyone.
Thank you.